So when you pull a fresh new leader out of the package, you can just attach that leader to your fly line, tie your fly onto the end of the leader, and you're ready to fish. But let's say you change your flies, so you snip off a bit of that leader, you catch a couple trees, you change your fly again, your leader gets shorter and shorter until eventually the end that you're tying onto your fly, it's a bit too thick. And so at this point, you have two options. You can either pull a brand new leader out of the package and do the same thing, but going through a bunch of leaders can start to get a bit expensive and it's just not necessary. And so option two is we can extend the life of that leader by grabbing a spool of tippet. Unlike leaders, tippet isn't tapered. In fly fishing jargon, you'll hear it called monofilament, mono meaning one. So it's just one diameter from end to end. A leader is composed of three parts. You have your butt section, which is the thick end, a tapered section, which gradually decreases in diameter until you reach the thin end, also known as the tippet section. And each leader has two characteristics. Number one is the diameter, or how thick the leader is. If you look at a leader package or a spool of tippet, you'll notice a number next to the letter X. This is the X rating system. In short, the smaller the number, the thicker diameter the leader or tippet. The bigger the number, the thinner diameter the leader or tippet. So a 6X leader is thinner than a 4X leader, which is thinner than a 2X leader. And before we talk about how to know which size leader we should use, we'll go over characteristic number 2, which is length. The general rule is to use a leader that is about the same length of your rod. But there are times when you want to shorten or lengthen your leader. Let's say you got some bigger flies, maybe a streamer or terrestrial, and you need a little extra power to turn them over. You might shorten your leader. But let's say you're dealing with some really picky fish. They can hear you get out of the truck and see you tying on that fly from a mile away and feel every single footstep as you get closer and closer to the riverbank. Okay, I may have gotten a little carried away with that description, but sometimes it feels like that, okay? But maybe they're a bit shy, they get fished too on the regular, or they're just super weary of any drag on your dry flies. It might be a good idea to lengthen that leader a couple. So now let's talk about the last part of our fly line system, and that's tippet. You'll use tippet for two different things. Like I said, extending the life of your leader and setting up different rigs. For example, if I wanted to set up a dry dropper rig, I would attach my dry fly to the end of my leader, then some tippet to the bend of the dry fly's hook, then the other end to a nymph. That way I can fish a dry fly riding on the water surface and a nymph underneath, working two water columns at the same time. And it's the same regardless of whatever rig you're setting up. Double dry, standard nymph, streamer, you're going to use tippet to build each one of those out. And the last thing to know about tippet is that there are two types: nylon, which some people just call mono, and fluorocarbon. Each is made of different materials, so each has their own unique characteristics, and each has their pros and cons. Nylon, the pros: it floats, it knots well, and is less expensive. The cons: it floats, so this isn't always ideal, maybe if you're fishing with nymphs or streamers, and it's prone to abrasions. So if you get snagged up on the bottom, or if you get caught on a branch, it has the tendency to break easy. And then fluorocarbon, the pros: it sinks, it's super strong, it's abrasion resistant, and because of its refractive index, or the way that light shines through it, some anglers argue that it's nearly invisible in water. And then the cons: it's a harder material, so sometimes knotting can be difficult, and it's a lot more expensive. Personally, I use nylon when I'm fishing with dry flies. Number one, it floats, and number two, it seems to bend or move a little bit more, and so it helps promote a more delicate presentation. And then fluorocarbon I use when I'm fishing with nymphs and streamers. It sinks and it's super strong, so if I get like snagged up on the bottom, it doesn't seem to break off as easily as nylon tippet. Now this is just what I like to do. You'll find that every angler has their personal preference. And if you just use nylon or if you just use fluorocarbon for everything, you're not gonna have any problems and you're gonna catch plenty of fish. All right, now we're getting into the good stuff. This is a question we get all the time. How do I choose the correct size leader or tippet? That's exactly what we're gonna talk about in the next video.